Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Welcome to our special, The Left's Hoax Machine. We're going to talk coming up about confirmation bias, why people believe hoaxes, and then we'll talk about the hoaxes that are to come, that you will be bombarded with on November 3rd and the months to follow. But I want to start off here, and we'll take a couple minutes to review, jog our memory of some of the hoaxes that we've lived through in the last 4 years. Before we start, though, can someone in New York, can you guys check on the Kurds? If you can just do a quick check on that, because remember that Trump pulled troops out of Syria, and we were told all the Kurds would die. So if you can just check on the Kurds, that'd be great, and we'll get an up. But you can't? Because of net neutrality? Oh, that's right, there's no more internet. I forgot. Thanks a lot, Trump, for net neutrality. Remember this footage from Syria?
This video right here appearing to show Turkey's military bombing Kurd civilians in a Syrian border town.
That was from a gun show in Kentucky, which looks awesome, by the way. Of course, you remember Jussie Smollett, Kavanaugh, Covington. Biden still says Trump called the white supremacists in Charlottesville very fine people. Trump actually said the neo-Nazis should be condemned totally, but that lie still lives on in this campaign. Do you remember when the New York Times said Trump did not pay income taxes for 18 years? And then it turns out Trump paid a higher income tax rate than Bernie Sanders and Barack Obama. How about kids in cages? Look at all Trump's kids in cages. Look at that. Oh my goodness. That photo and many others like it were from 2014 when Barack Obama was president. Here's this dramatic Time magazine cover. Look at this, Trump ripping crying children from their mother's arms. Here's the real picture. That girl from Honduras was never separated from her mother. Her mom just put her down for a second and the girl cried, as 2-year-olds often do. Joe Scarborough said that the Red Cross was banned from seeing infants and toddlers. That's how cruel Trump was. The Red Cross was banned from seeing infants and toddlers being incarcerated by Trump. And the American Red Cross had to come out and say, no, that's not true. Now, of course, this is how Trump views all immigrants here.
But we're taking people out of the country. You wouldn't believe how bad these people are. These aren't people. These are animals.
Oh, animals. The media, oh, Trump thinks immigrants are animals. He was talking about MS-13 gang members specifically, as you can tell by the sentence prior to that, as they cut it out. AFP, they said 100,000 children are in immigration detention centers, 100,000. Well, that was in 2015, again, under Obama. We could spend forever on Russian collusion. That was the longest hoax, certainly, of the last 4 years. CNN reporter said Congress was investigating a Russian investment fund with ties to Trump officials. Never happened. He got fired, actually. One of the rare cases where these people actually lose their jobs. Brian Ross would be the other one. ABC News, he lost his job for saying that Michael Flynn was going to testify that Trump directed him to make contact with the Russians. Never happened. Josh Rogan of the Washington Post, he reported that the State Department's entire senior administrative team resigned in protest for Trump. This is right after Trump won, and they all left. Everyone at the State Department left because they hated Trump so much, and in reality, they didn't quit as much as Trump fired them. But it wasn't even that dramatic because that's what happens when there's a presidential transition. ProPublica said CIA official, there was one CIA official, and later Trump's pick for CIA director, who was in charge of a secret CIA prison where a terrorist was waterboarded 83 times in 1 month, and she mocked his suffering. The story was retracted a year later because she didn't take charge of that base until a year after the interrogation ended on that terrorist. Whoops. NBC News tweeted that Putin told Megyn Kelly that he had compromising information on Trump. And then NBC News tweeted out that Putin actually said he does not have compromising information on Trump. Just minor detail. I mean, listen, they only got one word wrong. Pretty close. New York Times ran the story about Nikki Haley and how she was at the UN, ambassador to the UN, and she spent $52,000 on curtains. Can you believe that? I love how progressives all of a sudden very fiscally conservative. Spent $52,000 on curtains and did this whole thing about it, and it turns out that that purchase was made under the Obama administration. New York Times ran a story that Trump's taxes, they did a hypothetical family, and they said Trump's taxes would increase $4,000 for that family. And in reality, they would have gone down $43, not up $4,000. But again, it's not that far off, right? CNN did a report that the First Lady demanded Trump fire a national security advisor. Turns out that person still worked at the White House, just in a different job. The First Lady had nothing to do with anything. NBC News said that Trump was the first president since 2002 to not visit troops at Christmas time. Can you believe this heartless president? The problem is he did, of course. Media ran this picture of a 4th of July crowd. This is in 2019. Look, no one showed up. No one showed up to Trump's, well, except for this picture here. The actual crowd. That picture was taken before the event started. We could spend forever on all the fake hate crimes. Good night. My favorite, this was right after Trump mentioned the squad, and he said the squad should go back and fix the totally broken, crime-infested places they came from, right? And everyone's, oh, outrageous. In Georgia, there was a black female lawmaker who said a white man in a grocery store told her, go back where you came from, just like the president told the squad. Look at the example that our president is making for the country. And she had a press conference about it, and the guy crashed it. The guy shut up and said, no. You told me to go back where I came from. She painted, and the media painted this whole thing to make that guy out to be a racist Trump supporter. And in fact, he's a Democrat from Cuba. Fake hate crimes. How about the black girl who said that boys pinned her down and cut her dreadlocks off at the school that Mike Pence's wife works at? Never happened. She came out and admitted she made it up. My favorite of these is the noose that was in a tree in Oakland. Remember that one? And the mayor said intentions don't matter of what happened. It turns out it was this guy's exercise equipment. The FBI, of course, investigated that noose that someone hung to intimidate Bubba Wallace. And that rope had been there for a year. Remember the story of Trump's Muslim ban, which wasn't a Muslim ban at all. That was a hoax too. But there was one story in particular that got 123,000 shares, the original story, online. And it was about a woman in Iraq. She was stuck. And her son flew to Iraq to get her because she needed medical treatment in the United States. But Trump's travel ban prevented them from traveling, and she died. Never happened. MSNBC's Nicole Wallace said that President Trump talked about exterminating Latinos. Then later came out and said that never happened. All these people still have their jobs, by the way. And then, of course, the entire premise of the Atlantic story not long ago. But the 4 anonymous sources said so. We could spend forever on COVID, right? The media said that Trump cut the CDC budget when in reality he raised it. Media said that Trump called the virus a hoax when in fact he called the Democrats' politicization of the virus a hoax. CBS News ran a video of an overpacked hospital in New York City. Turns out it was actually in Italy. They apologized, and then they used the same video the next day to show a hospital in Pennsylvania. New York Times ran a story that we need to make 800,000 ventilators because we're going to need 1 million ventilators, and we're woefully behind, and this is all the president's fault. But in fact, we didn't need 1 million ventilators. We needed 1 million ventilators over the course of the pandemic, not 1 million at the same time. Again, minor detail. Maybe my favorite of the whole COVID thing was HCQ, right? The media said that Trump called HCQ a miracle drug, and it's going to save everyone's life. And in reality, Trump said, it may work, it may not work. In case it does work, we want to have it. Now, it may not work, in which case, hey, it didn't work. It may work, in which case it's going to save a lot of lives. Now, a lot of people say it has a profound effect. Well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And the media is like, oh, Trump touts miracle drug, but don't take it, it'll kill you. Just ask this couple in Arizona. The husband died taking HCQ. Found out a couple days later it was fish tank cleaner. But, whatever, blame Trump. And you know that if Trump said HCQ doesn't work, the media would say, oh, HCQ is an amazing miracle drug, and Trump isn't doing enough for the American people to get more HCQ. We could keep going, but that was a fun trip down memory lane. Just remember all this. Remember who these people are when the election takes place and we get the news about what the results are. These people are a range from total hacks over here to total hacks who can't do math over here. Case in point.
When I read it tonight on social media, it kind of all became clear. Bloomberg spent $500 million on ads. U.S. population, 327 million. Don't tell us if you're ahead of us on the math. He could have given each American $1 million and have had lunch money left over. It's an incredible way of putting it.
It's an incredible way of putting it. It's true. It's disturbing. It does suggest, what we're talking about here, which is there's too much money in politics.
$1 million per American, or just a little over $1. But you know, close enough. She's an editorial board member for the New York Times. She is right about one thing, though. This fake news, the left's hoax machine, it is incredible, it's true, and it's disturbing. Keep all this in mind come November. True story, Mike Slater. Oh, also, Epstein didn't kill himself. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special, The Left's Hoax Machine. So we just ran through a not even nearly exhaustive list, although it was exhausting to go through it all, of hoaxes over the last 4 years. Let's take a pause here and dive a little deeper into a couple of them. Carrie Lucas is the Vice President of Independent Women's Voices. Carrie, how are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Good to talk to you. So, listen, we have tons to choose from here. What's one that pops into your head when people say hoax?
You know, I think that one of the worst things about the media's treatment of the right is it's not so much a hoax as the misconception or the mistreatment of making a big deal out of nothing. And I think you can see that a lot with our First Lady and how she is constantly treated for her clothing choices. I mean, this is supposed to be very taboo because obviously it's a little bit sexist to focus on a woman's clothes. But man, the media has really tried to make scandals out of Melania's choice of clothing when there's really no there.
Yeah, I remember, as you said, I forget the order. I think it was Democrats. So Hillary Clinton wore a white dress to the convention, and she was hearkening back to the suffragettes who fought for a woman's right to it. And then the next week, Melania wore a white dress, and it was an obvious nod to the white supremacists in the Republican Party. And it was the same fashion reporter for like the Philadelphia Inquirer or something who wrote that. Anyway, what do you have an example in mind?
Exactly. Actually, you know, this week you had Kamala Harris was wearing Timberland boots, and there was this is so fashionable, and isn't it great? Great boots paired with pearls. Isn't she fabulous? And then literally the same news source, I think this was on Yahoo, that was pointed years ago, was saying that when Melania wore Timberland boots to an army base, she was going someplace to speak to the military and was wearing them, and she was absolutely. They said, "Oh, this is terrible and insulting to the men in service." Come on, what are we talking about here? It's absolutely crazy and a true double standard.
Yeah, and there was another one I just saw recently where she was wearing like a army green dress with a big belt, and they said it was like a Nazi uniform or something. You're like, geez. And I think the Kamala wearing Timberland boots is when David Brooks in the New York Times back in 2008 said, "I was looking at his pant leg and his perfectly creased pant," right? Like falling in love with Barack Obama's ironing skills. Makes him a good president, just like Kamala's Timberland boots would make her a good president. Insane. All right, what's another one you got? What's another hoax or ridiculous's?
More seriously, you think back of the last several years, and you think back to the Jussie Smollett situation, and I think that's one. Another perfect example of the media's absolute selective reporting. It was a huge deal when Jussie Smollett had come out and said he was attacked, but very quickly, I think those of us with a little bit of credibility was saying, really in Chicago there was these crazy MAGA Trump supporters at 2 a.m. Looking to attack a famous guy because he's black and gay. I mean, it really didn't add up, but it took a while to get that. And it's kind of funny, and it's it's funny to see everybody get duped. But I think in that one, there's an awful lot of seriousness to it, because I do think that's not a single incident. There are a whole lot of stories out there where you hear about racial attacks, which if they would be absolutely appalling, and they really create a sense that when you first see it, you think, oh my gosh, like, is our country really that bad? And I think so many people don't get the follow-up, never hear that, like, actually that was debunked. That wasn't true. That was somebody making something up to try to garner some sympathy. But it does leave us with this sense that our country is much worse when it comes to racial equality, and kind of to to racial relations. And so these hoaxes, man, that's a serious thing. That's really bad as a narrative to push about our country.
Coming up in the next segment, we're going to talk with a philosophy professor, Justin Tosi, about confirmation bias. And that's a perfect example of that. Like the fact that you would believe, as you said, 2 a.m, like in January, freezing cold, Chicago, huh? Like you only believed that if you wanted to believe that, which so many of our journalists did. All right, can you wrap us up with a third, Carrie? Third example.
Well, I think that another one you can see just on the tremendous difference in reporting is the Joe Biden sexual harassment stuff. I mean, sure, Tara Reid got a little bit of coverage for a couple days, but gosh, can you imagine if they had such a credible? This is a woman who came out and quit her job. There was contemporaneous reporting or a confirmation from her friends about her having talked about having been harassed by the then Senator Biden, and man, they just want to sweep that one away and pretend it isn't there. And this in the era of Me Too, when this is supposed to be a big deal. So that's another. It's nice to be a liberal. This is a perfect example of progressive privilege when you compare that treatment to what Brett Kavanaugh went under. I think it shows just the tremendous bias out there.
100%. Carrie Lucas, Vice President of Independent Women's Voice. Carrie, always good to talk to you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Good trip down memory road, all these hoaxes and double standards. We've got many more to come. Coming up next, as I said, Professor Tosi can talk about confirmation bias and why people believe these hoaxes. It's coming up next on our special. Exposed, the left's hoax machine. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special. We're talking about hoaxes. And I'm so grateful for our next guest because I want to talk about the science behind why we believe hoaxes and specifically confirmation bias, but there's a lot going on here. First person I thought of was Justin Tosi, professor at Texas Tech. And the book is called Grandstanding, The Use and Abuse of Moral Talk. It is excellent. Please go buy it. It's called Grandstanding. Professor Tosi, how are you, brother?
I'm great. How are you doing, Mike?
Good to talk to you. I think confirmation bias, I mean, you know way more than me, but I think confirmation bias is the main thing here, right? So let's maybe just start with that, and then we can go into some other insight that I'm sure you have. So what is confirmation bias?
Confirmation bias is our tendency to notice evidence, especially that affirms our prior beliefs, or to interpret any evidence in light of supporting our prior beliefs. So a great example here are polls. So people, whenever they see a poll about a candidate or a race they're invested in, they like to interpret that poll in a way that makes them feel better about their candidate's chance of winning. So, if their candidate's ahead by a point or two, they're like, yes, he's definitely winning. He's going to win. If he's behind by a point or two, they might pay a little more attention to that margin of error and say, well, okay, it says he's behind a point or two, but the margin of error is 3, so he's probably still ahead. So that's, a really simple example, but this is just sort of how our brains work. They are out to make us feel good about what we already believe, rather than always to discover what's true.
Okay, I love that line. So it's out to make us feel good about what we already believe. Why? Why do our brains do that?
Yeah, so it's a real puzzle. There are a lot of possible explanations. The thing that's weird about it is you would think, we've all evolved to be fit to survive. It's kind of strange to think that our brains would mislead us. But here's a reason that it might make sense. We're all social beings. We have to cooperate with other people. So even if you're really smart, if you can't get along with other people, then you're not going to do very well. So your genes might be selected out. But if other people can trust you, if you get along better with people in your group, then you're more likely to survive and pass on your genes and have more kids, that sort of thing. So what does that have to do with confirmation bias? Well, all of our cherished beliefs, at least some of these, have to do with group membership and our group identity. So if I'm a kind of really skeptical guy going around saying, this thing that all of you people that I need to deal with in my everyday life, all of you believe these things, and it seems like there's all this evidence that it's wrong, and like I believe them too, but I'm not so sure. Then people are not going to like you very much. But if you're telling them comforting tales, like, oh no, sure, this might look bad, but I mean, we can see a way out of this. Like, don't worry, I'm on your team. So in other words, there's a kind of incentive to grandstand to other people, to show them your heart's in the right place. You believe the things that they do, even when the times are tough, right? So they can depend on you. And it's also very tempting to lie even to yourself in this way. To say, no, you don't need to reconsider all of your deeply held beliefs. There's a story I can spin that fits with this evidence, and then also makes it okay not to change my mind.
Yeah. So you're saying we put a priority on group membership over truth. Is that a fair way to put that?
That's right. Yeah. And
wow,
and the reason for that is just that we need these other people. Sorry, go on.
Well, no. That's what I'm just thinking. That's interesting. What do we do with that? That's because it makes sense. It's good to get along with other people. So what do we do with that? Like, because that's still a good thing. So how do you balance that? So I guess we should have a society that puts truth above, you know what I mean? What should the ultimate goal here then be, right? Because if you put a society that puts truth above group membership, I don't know. What's your prescription?
Well, I mean, one way of proceeding is to try to encourage values and norms in favor of being open, in favor of not putting too much emphasis on the lies that bind. Right, to saying it's okay just to follow the evidence. The core values of our group should be truth-seeking. But I mean, look, your reaction I think is completely reasonable. Sometimes we just have to decide between two things that are important. Seeking the truth is important, and getting along together and having a direction is also important. So it just looks like we kind of have to trade off in this way, and some of it's inevitable. I kind of tend to side toward truth-seeking, being a philosopher and all, but this is just kind of a balancing act.
Yeah, wow. Okay, can you give me? I mean, I see it every day, right? Because a major part of my job is compiling news and stories to talk about. So I'm grateful that a couple of years ago I first came across confirmation bias so that I could see it in myself, and I'm sure I only see a fraction of what it is. Sure. So I think we have a billion examples that, if we're honest, we can see in ourselves. But what research is done or has been done to prove that this is a phenomenon beyond just personal anecdotes?
There's a great study at your alma mater, Mike, at Yale, showing people videos of a protest. So there are two versions of a video that they'll show people. In one version, protesters are blocking access to an abortion clinic. In another version, they're blocking access to a military recruiter's office. So what the study finds is that people answer just purely descriptive questions about what's going on in the video based on how they feel about abortion or the military. So the survey, in the study says, okay, look, there's a law that says you can't block access to an abortion clinic, or you can't block access to a military recruiter. Are the people in this video blocking access to whichever thing that you see? So the people who don't like abortion and don't want people going into an abortion clinic are more likely to say, "Oh no, they're not blocking it. People can still get through. They're just not going." And the same for the military recruiter. Yeah. So this is a nice case because, this is an instance of people's deeply held moral beliefs being at stake. So you can see, if the result's right, that even answering just something you can see with your own eyes, people find a way to finesse and interpret this evidence so that it looks okay. And then the other people in their group can see, okay, this guy is, he's a straight shooter. He's not looking for trouble. And, he's making me feel good about my beliefs. I can trust him. So there's this incentive to grandstand like this and just take every opportunity you can to show people that your heart's in the right place.
Yeah, and that goes to your book. And you said that was a Yale study, so that means it's the best study ever done, and it's obviously accurate. There you go.
Right.
That's a little
Some people have come
example
at
of the.
It's solid.
No. It's perfect. Those people hate America. So one of my coworkers, I just saw a Facebook message he wrote, and it was some story and some political story, and then it ended with, "If you're for this administration, you and I are enemies." That seems like a problematic stance to take. So, as we proceed, because things are going to get crazier and crazier, no doubt about it, and it's just going to be confirmation bias all over the place. What's your advice for me as an individual? And then is there any way that one can point out another person's confirmation bias or help unravel someone else's, or is that an impossibility?
Yeah, that's really tough. So, the thing to tell people about this, I think, is this is a natural tendency we have, but it's not inevitable. Honesty is also a tendency that we have. So I think it's important when you talk to people that you disagree with to kind of give them an out, to try not to embarrass them. Because, if you do that, you put them on the spot, and then they just kind of, understandably dig in and say, I don't see it at all that way. You're being a real jerk here. And they've got to save face in front of their friends. So, so
what's an out? What would an out be? A save face out? Yeah.
So, I think it's good to acknowledge some nuance in whatever is being argued about. So, acknowledge, look, yeah, you're right. It's complicated. It's not straightforward. But, look at this part of the evidence that you're kind of glossing over or trying to brush past. I can understand, you see these other things, but it looks to me a bit more complicated. And here's why you might see the other side. So, giving people a chance to meet you halfway and compromise. Now, this is dangerous to do, of course, because you have people watching you too, and they might think, why is he even stooping to this level, right? It's so clear.
He's betraying our group. He's betraying our group.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's so much pressure on everyone frankly, to grandstand, to show everyone what their values are. And sometimes you just have to resist that temptation as much as you can and send a more nuanced message.
Okay. I got like a minute. As I just forced you to talk about confirmation bias, is there any other force at play here, psychological or philosophical point at play that you see in the upcoming election and aftermath that we need to be aware of?
Yeah. So, here's a political phenomenon in general. There's a nice recent study that I like out of the University of British Columbia showing that people can kind of get things for themselves by posing as virtuous victims. So they'll show not only that they have the right values, they're a member in good standing of whatever group, but they've been done wrong in some way. So what the study shows, why I like the study so much, is that people who are psychopaths or who score higher on measures of manipulation or narcissism are much more likely to present themselves as these kinds of victims. So I think, we see this, and there's a recent case in academia of this woman posing as Latina. She's white, Jewish, and, rising to, I guess, a position of some prominence in her field because people, treat her as a member of a disadvantaged group. So, I see this as another thing to look out for and a reason to be kind of skeptical of people who protest a bit too much about their group membership, about how strongly they feel about their moral values. We've got gotta keep our guards up about this sort of thing.
Yeah, really good. Grandstanding, the use and abuse of moral talk, Justin Tosi. Go get the book, Grandstanding by Justin Tosi. Professor, thanks, man. Let's talk again. It's gonna get crazier, so we'll need more insight from you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you. More coming up. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special, The Left's Hoax Machine. Okay, let's talk about where we're going now. I want to go to Jim Hansen. He's the president of the Security Studies Group. He has a book called The Myth of White Fragility. He's a former U.S. Army Special Forces, conducted counterterrorism, counterinsurgency operations, and information operations as well. Mr. Hansen, how are you, sir?
Doing well.
Really good to talk to you. Let's, we got a ton to do. So what do you see the role of big technology being and the social media companies in particular in the next, we got, 50 days and then weeks to follow after the election where it's going to be even more chaotic. What's the role of technology, the big tech companies?
They are the monopoly power over what information all Americans can access, which is horrifying to me. The problem we have right now is if anyone asks a question online, Google answers it. They do 90% of the internet searches. So if I ask, is Donald Trump a villain? The question's going to come back with the bias inherent in Google's algorithms and in the fact that as a corporation, they are woke and their employees are overwhelmingly woke. So the bias inherent in both their technology and the people developing and designing their technology ensures that Americans cannot get a straight answer to any question. They get the propaganda the left wants us to see.
It's so wild. And is there any parallel to this in history? Like, there's a movie called The Social Dilemma, and one of these former Google ethicists has this line that there's 50 white guys in Silicon Valley who are programming the thoughts and actions of 200 million Americans. Like, that's got to be unprecedented, right?
Absolutely not. It is completely precedented. And the precedents are the Soviet Union and the Chinese communists who control the information that their people get. They just are upfront about it, and they do it through state power. You know, I mean, when the Soviet Union was running, all media, all news, all information came with the state stamp seal of approval. You know, it was comical that their main news organ was called Pravda, which means truth. And that was absurd. There was absolutely no truth in it. There was propaganda. And the Chinese communists have almost as good a control now. They probably have somewhat less, though, which is sad for us, than the Silicon Valley tech companies have over what Americans can see. So they simply took the things that the left had done in totalitarian states and did it using the free market because they have monopoly control between Google, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. They control the vast majority of non-major media outlet information to Americans. And they are not even pretending to play fair.
No, it's so crazy that Google's original motto is "Don't be evil," right? And a couple of years they got rid of that, right? It's wild. Give us, I don't know if this is something you like to do, but can you help us intellectually and perhaps even emotionally prepare for what is to come in the chaos? So, like, what's something that you predict we might see and should be prepared for, these tech companies?
Well, if you're talking short term about the election, they have already started talking about how they are going to control the information flow on election night to ensure that no one can pass information, including President Trump, about who's winning or who's potentially losing the election. They want to ensure, and they will shut down or mute or censor accounts that are saying things that they don't agree with. They've done the same thing with COVID. They've decided if you put information up about COVID that is not, compliant with the World Health Organization, they'll shut your account down. They're using that same concept now to control in the run-up to the election what you can talk about, and also once the election happens, and obviously it's a pretty near certainty President Trump will be ahead election night because more Republicans vote in person. But what they don't want to happen is him to claim victory while the Democrats are busy preparing their lawsuits and trying to turn this into Bush v. Gore 2000 redux.
We saw Zuckerberg the other day, out of nowhere, said that they're going to make very clear that we don't know the results yet. We don't know. So he said that. It's wild. What do you think they're going to do? Are they going to put like a little banner underneath Trump's tweets that say he won, or do you think they'll shut down his account, or somewhere in between?
It's going to be really interesting because the situation for the tech companies, if President Trump gets reelected, they're in trouble. You know, there was not enough done, in my opinion, during the first 4 years to show that they've used their monopoly power both to abuse consumers, to steal information for privacy, but even worse, as in-kind contributions to the Democrats and to progressive political causes. Every time they limit the reach of conservative accounts and push the ideas of liberal accounts, that is a massively valuable contribution to the left, to the Democrats, and it hurts Republicans. So I think if President Trump gets reelected, the second term is going to involve bringing the pain to those social media companies using the Federal Election Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Federal Communications Commission to force them to play fair.
So it's not only ideological, it's also like their livelihoods are on the line as tech companies. At least that's how they're going to feel it, that this is an existential crisis for them that Trump loses.
They have to have him lose because he can affect their market values. If there are investigations and potentials to shut down their business models because they're using monopoly power, then they are in grave danger of being broken up or shut down in ways that will cost them money, which means their investors are going to back off, their stock prices are going to crash, and they're going to be forced to stop being the saviors of the left that they feel it's their God-given right to do. So all of those things are forcing them to act in ways that are dangerous, and I think they're going to get caught with their fingers on the scale.
Yeah, of course they're going. If that's true, which I think it is, of course they're going to do whatever they can to manipulate perception, at the least. What else do you think they can do other than maybe delete a Trump tweet saying he won or something? What else is something you see these tech companies doing to influence post-election?
I think in the run-up and in post-election, the main thing they're doing is killing counter-narratives. There is an existing narrative that the Democrats, the left, and the activists want to happen, which is Biden's going to win, Trump is evil, the entire array of things related to that. And the way they influence that is by ensuring that conservative information doesn't get out. We did a study of when Twitter was doing what was called shadow banning, and they literally put in a filter that shut down the accounts of Republican Congress people and not their Democrat challengers. They do it regularly. My account personally on Twitter gets somewhere in the vicinity of 1/3 the traffic it should based on the number of followers I have and the number of people who retweet my information. That is not an uncommon thing. Most conservatives see that happen. And so that control allows them, when information comes out that they don't like, such as Trump's way ahead on election night on in-person voting, they can suppress that. And when they start doing things like challenging the invalidated mail-in ballots and things like that, they can push that information and stop conservatives and other media outlets like yourselves from telling the truth. And they're going to use that relentlessly.
And I don't think we're long for Twitter. I'm amazed whenever I watch a Jordan Peterson video on YouTube. I'm always amazed that it's still there, right? That it still even exists at all. When do you think they're going to be more blatant about it, right? Right now it's shadow banning. Do you think they're ever going to come out and be like, we're just banned. We're just outright, you're banned. No more Jordan Peterson or whatever. Or is that too dystopian for them?
They may never admit it because why would you admit it? They gain nothing from admitting it. They can lie and obfuscate and the media will cover for them. But just this week, they took down a video off YouTube from Dr. Scott Atlas, who is now a member of the COVID task force, who is a distinguished scientist because his opinions were incorrect. All right. So we now have Twitter and YouTube deciding who is correct on science and censoring and muting voices that disagree with their chosen narrative. That should scare the heck out of Americans.
Yeah, I remember a couple weeks ago there was a thing that that group of doctors or whatever, and the same kind of thing. Yeah, so the precedent's already there, and they can justify it. They'll find ways. I'm sure Russia and China are loving all of this, right? They're absolutely loving it. So what's their role in it? Do they have a direct role? Do they have a significant role? Or are they just these kind of boogeymen that both sides really point to blame for their loss?
I think that's a fair assessment. They have less influence than a lot of people would like to believe, especially the left. You know, as invested as they were in the Trump-Russia narrative, they really wanted to show that somehow, you know, Russian Facebook memes threw the election from Hillary to Trump. You know, the kind of people who share that stuff already have their minds made up. Yes. But what the Russians and Chinese are doing and always have done is sow division. So they play both sides against the middle, and they go ahead and amplify the craziest things on the right or the left and push those around so that both sides look crazy and so that the American, you know, populace is more divided and more polarized. And that's to their advantage. They want to, you know, devalue either political candidate and go ahead and push the idea that America is so messed up that it can't rule itself, it can't govern itself. And that, you know, causes problems with our trust in government, our trust in the elections. And that is what they want. They want us to be weaker because of that.
Yeah, so if we're weaker at home, then obviously our influence abroad will be less as well. And then they can fill the vacuum. Is that their play?
Absolutely. You know, the more they can distract us dealing with ourselves, the more they can get away with, both internally here. You know, they can continue, the Chinese can continue to steal our intellectual property. The Russians can continue to play us all over the world. And both of them gain when we are busy fighting these imaginary battles in the home front.
Can they do outright things more so than like 4 years ago when it was just silly memes or organizing like a pro-Hillary rally and a Trump rally at the same time? Like that's like silly stuff. But is it possible for them to do some more serious damage, whether it's with disinformation or even hacking, or is that nothing to be worried about?
You know, I think if they were going to, it's going to be hacking. You know, one of the things that came out in 2016 were the Democrat emails. All right, that was actually, and it showed some horrific things about what the Democrats were doing. So I think that was an actual influence. I think their ability to, on the information operations side of things, to change people's minds and to do that is very, very small. Now, the tech companies and the Democrats want to amplify that and make us believe it's more because, like you said, that's a great boogeyman, you know, for them to point to. And, oh, the evil overseas foreigners are influencing our elections. But in reality, the influence that the big tech companies have is orders of magnitude more than anything China, Russia, and everybody else could do. The tech companies own our information space. They use it for partisan political purposes. And I truly hope that we go ahead and break their monopolies because the American people deserve access to free information.
Yeah, really good. Okay, I got about a minute or so. What's your big advice, right? I mean, you've in combat settings, you've seen disinformation spread, and why and all that. What's your advice? How should we approach the next however long until the election and afterwards? How should we view the news? What do we do?
I think one thing all Americans should do is don't trust any information until you dig into the sources. But that's it. You know, you have to go ahead and dig into the source information. If CNN says something, if something on Facebook, it doesn't matter what it is. Look to see where they're getting their information from. If CNN's quoting 4 anonymous sources, then what they're doing is finding their friends at some agency to tell them what they want to hear. If you see a meme on Facebook, you know, that says Joe Biden is a space alien, well, I think that's possible at this point. But go ahead and at least see if they've got some source information on it. So you want to go ahead and do not trust any first level information that you get anywhere. Yes. And then go ahead and base your decisions by triangulating to the truth. If CNN says something, see what Fox says. You know, if MSNBC says something, see what the Daily Caller says. See what First TV says. Go to sources who are not part of the established narrative and use them to triangulate using your own judgment, because no one out there is telling the unvarnished truth. All humans are biased. All outlets are biased.
Yeah, that's true. Do you see this going well, this election and post-election?
I think this election and post-election is going to be a terribly dangerous test of our democracy and our democratic process. Right now, we're not going to get results on election night. None of the media outlets are going to tell us what the real score is. And then the Democrats are going to take all the mail-in ballots and challenge every single ballot that is invalidated. So we stand a decent chance of this getting thrown past the Electoral College because many of the states will not be able to call their races and potentially going to the House of Representatives. That is not something we should ever want, and it's going to be scary. And, you know, we are a strong country, as polarized as we are, but this is going to be a serious test.
Yeah, and we see it coming too, which is wild. Well, Jim, I hope you can help guide us through it because it's going to get crazier. I feel like we're like a little as uncalm as this is like a little calm before the storm when things really pop off, probably in a couple weeks here. Jim Hansen, President, Security Studies Group. The book is Myth of White Fragility. Jim, appreciate your time, sir.
Good to be with you.
There you go. That's our special, The Left's Hoax Machine. See you on Monday. Spread the word.